Welcome to the Divine Style Podcast with Gerlinda, Stella, personal stylist and self-love coach, and Alison, Maiden, psychic medium, spiritual healer and metaphysical teacher. Each episode you'll experience spiritual lessons to cultivate self-love and self-expression so you can become the best version of you.
My name's Gerlinda, Stella.
And I'm Alison, Maiden.
Today we have a very special guest who is also one of your dear friends. We'll be talking today about anxiety and addiction and how you can overcome it.
Yes, I'm so excited to be talking to Craig Homine, who is a hypnotherapist and a dear friend of mine. We've known each other for a very long time and we've worked together for a very long time. And Craig has got a vast background in all sorts of therapies, and that comes under the banner, of course, of hypnotherapy. But he would be, I would say, the best in Australia, and I say that quite honestly. So I'm just going to throw over to you with that massive introduction, Craig.
Oh, thanks for that. Best in Australia? I don't know. I don't know about that.
Is that the world?
Well, yeah, that's better. Now we're getting there. And that's interesting, though. Like I did most of my training overseas. I didn't do it in Australia. So when I started, that would have been, well, when I really started, when you really go back, I would have been in my 20s. I'm 57 now. So it's been a long time and a long journey and lots of different modalities along the way. But when I very first started off, it was just fun. It's like most people who start off when they get into it. Some people start off doing hypnotherapy because they've been to a hypnotist and have achieved some amazing results. And then they want to know how to do it too. That's how most people start.
Well, I think that's the same with everything. Quite honestly, the interest has to be there first, obviously. Yeah. But, making people cluck like chickens and things like that's not as important as
Yeah. But that's what I wanted to do because I work in nightclubs and I saw a hypnotist on stage and I didn't believe it was true. And when we were having staff drinks afterwards, like at 3 a.m, I watched him actually hypnotize a girl to buy him drinks every time he'd finished the drink. And I thought that would be an amazing skill to have somebody buy drinks. So that's really where it all started. And so I got sucked into the rabbit hole, and in Australia there was no one that could teach. So I bought a few books, which was fine to start with, and then went to the States and learned off a whole lot of people who were quite famous. Most of them are passed away now in the States, and then went to the UK and did a few things over there as well, and just kept on going.
Well, I can testify to the fact that your office wall is covered in certificates. And
oh yeah, I pulled most of them down because you look a bit dorky having a whole wall full of certificates.
Yeah. To have all that wisdom.
It's amazing. So did you actually do stage hypnotism after learning about it, or did you go straight into then using it as a therapy?
The interesting part was that's where I wanted to go because I'm in my 20s at the time, and I just wanted to do the fun stuff. I thought it'd be great to go into parties and just hypnotize everybody to pretend they were somebody else. And yeah, you have all those sort of fantasies about stuff. But what happened was, because there was no one in Australia to teach at that time, I had to order books from overseas. And I was ordering books on stage hypnosis and comedy hypnosis and learning from them and some of the really great hypnotists and authors of the time and the past. And this one bookstore, which was an online bookstore, and back in those days, it was dial-up internet and email, and it was really slow and it was really cumbersome, and there was no Amazon that find particular people that sold particular books. And this one guy in New York City who I was buying books from, you'd wait 2-3 weeks, 6 weeks sometimes for a book. The book that arrived that I'd ordered was not the book that I sent away for. So I ordered for a stage hypnosis book. And in the mail came this huge, big, thick textbook called Hypnotherapy, all about using hypnosis for medical purposes.
Intervening, isn't it?
Yeah. So I started reading it, and it was like the first page got me. And some of these things were things that I was suffering myself. Like I was extremely shy, and I didn't like talking in front of people, and that held me back in my job and everything. And I thought, wow, I didn't even really know you could use it for this. So I studied the book and started using a little bit on some of the people that I was playing around with. And then I decided that this was the direction that I wanted to take. So I wanted to contact the author of the book and see if I could go over to America and learn directly from him. And he'd passed away. and because it was a pretty old book.
Right.
But the people that I contacted and in this roundabout way put me in contact with people who he had taught. And it became sort of like, I suppose, like with Alison with Reiki, it's you got like a lineage of teachers. And even in hypnotherapy, there's a lineage of teachers and they go off in different styles and different ways and different branches. And so I got sort of into that lineage and his students and the people from him that became very famous afterwards. And it's all branched out from there. So I ended up traveling around learning from his students and then learning from their students and then eventually just sort of morphing it into my own style as well.
Hypnotherapy can be such an amazing thing. When there's so many different modalities out there, it's very confusing for people to know, which one to choose. And I find that hypnotherapy is that really wonderful bridge between maybe the spiritual and the physical world. People that wouldn't or not ordinarily maybe have a Reiki treatment or a past life healing or those sorts of treatments, they go, okay, well, hypnotherapy is mainstream. Everyone does hypnotherapy. Whereas, I know you are a Reiki master and teacher. I know that because I taught you. So, and where we come to here is that you have got that wonderful balance between the two.
Yeah. You do need that energy as well. You can't just. There's a lot of people that do hypnosis or hypnotherapy and they've learned to read a script or they've learned to follow a system. It's not the same as doing it from your heart and using the energy, and it's got to be intuitive. Every person is so different, but with people's permission, I normally touch. So if I've got my hand on someone's shoulder or I'm touching their arm or the back of their hand, I can generally feel things. And once you touch someone, you seem to receive a lot more and have a bigger understanding. It's not uncommon for someone to come into me, say they're drinking too much, and it morphs into something completely different because we just end up going somewhere else, and the whole drinking problem isn't really the problem. Yeah, it's more the symptom of the problem. And it just comes up, the tears start to come out, and next thing you know, we're working on something that is a very deep hurt or problem from the past. And in some cases, even from past lives, it's not uncommon for them to go to things like that.
Wow. There is a saying that I remember, and it's, I'm not upset for the reason I think. And that really reminds me of that. We go in thinking that the problem is about one thing, but it's about so many more. And I love that hypnosis and, like you said, that be able to touch and feel, be able to sense, to be able to go deeper. What would you say, because from what I understand, hypnotherapy helps you get to the root cause.
Yeah.
And how far back? So you're saying it can be in past lives, not just in this lifetime, but you can go right back with hypnotherapy.
But the way that I do it, it's non-directed. So a lot of people will they'll go particularly to a person for a past life healing or for a soul regression or between lives. It's not the way that I work. The way I work is I will activate the symptom that the person comes in with, which means either the anxiety or the drinking problem or the cancer or whatever else it is. And I'll ask the mind to take me to the reason that this is happening. So what will happen then is the mind will just shoot back to what it believes is an event of significance in the chain of events that has caused the problem. And it's never a single event. It might go to something when they're 15 that they have a conscious memory of. And then I'll ask the mind if this was the first time that it ever experienced that problem. And if it says, no, this is actually still a familiar feeling to me at 15, it'll shoot them back further. And we just keep going back until you see this look of shock on the person's face that lets me know that this is new. I've never felt this before. I've never experienced this before. And at that point, I'll ask them to go even further back and I'll check and make sure whether or not they've got the symptom or the problem. And if they report that they don't, I know that I'm before it started. And then we start doing all the work and then bring them up through all the activating events to clear them so that when they get back up to here and now, the mind has realized where it made the mistake in its processing so that it lets it go. Because that's all it is. It's just a mistake of the subconscious thinking, because the way the unconscious works is we can't actually talk to it. It doesn't understand language, it only understands experience. All our senses will take in all the information of something that's happening. And let's say it's a traumatic event. So we'll do something nice and easy. Like, I'll use an example. There's one guy that he came to me. His problem was he could only eat 2 types of food. He couldn't eat any other types of food. He could only eat chicken nuggets and French fries or chips. And he was 35. He had no health problems, but that's all he could eat. And anything else would make him gag. His wife sent him in. He didn't want to come in. And when a wife sends her husband in, it's not a good sign because he normally doesn't want to be there. All right, he's going there to make her happy and to tell her that it didn't work. That's all he cares about. And he was explaining to me that he was completely okay with eating chicken nuggets and chips. That's all he wanted to eat. And I know that's not true. Can't be true. It's impossible. So we get a bit of a rapport together and we do like the blokey thing, and talk about things and sort of get on his side. And then he admits to me, like he would like to change, but he can't. He said he literally gags and wants to vomit when he puts anything other than nuggets and chips in his mouth. Consciously, he kind of knew where it came from, but it didn't make any difference. Just because you know where something comes from doesn't mean you can fix it. There are lots of people who had traumatic childhoods, and they know it was traumatic, but they can't fix it. So what was happening was his unconscious mind, when he was a little boy, his dad was quite a violent guy and an alcoholic, and he had rules. So when he would come home from work, everyone had to sit at the table and had to eat their dinner. And if you didn't eat it, you weren't allowed to leave the table, and dad would just keep drinking. And no matter what it was, you had to finish it. So it would be a standoff between him and his dad. Dad would always win because dad was bigger and more violent. So dad would physically hurt him and then shove the food down his throat until he vomited. Force fed him until he puked it all up and then beat him up and sent him to bed. And it was a ritual that happened nearly every night. So, of course, his unconscious mind makes a big mistake. It doesn't blame dad for the gagging and the vomiting. It's blaming the food. That's making me feel upset. That's making me feel bad every time I have dinner. And so it goes into this defense mechanism, which is what anxiety is. It's trying to work out what it was that was making him sick. So it's assuming it's the food. So now as an adult, every time that food comes near him, he gets a gag reflex because his body's trying to protect him from the problem. And that's pretty much the way everything works. And the way I work is I want to find the problem, and then we've got to use different techniques to scramble the programming to eliminate the problem.
I think what you said was really poignant, because the fact that he didn't blame his father, which we know as an adult, when you're looking at the situation, you 100% would go, well, it's your dad. Yeah. But that his mind as a child couldn't blame the person that was meant to be caring for him. So instead it made the decision to blame the food.
When you're a kid, you just want to please your parents. Mm-hmm. All right? If anything, if they're not pleased, it's your fault. Mm-hmm. So as an adult, we know that's not true. Yeah, and the same comes with rejection. So if you're being rejected as a child, you're not blaming the adults for having an issue and not being able to be good parents, or you're blaming yourself. You're saying, if only I could be better, if only they would love me, if only I could do it better, mum and dad wouldn't be fighting, mum and dad wouldn't have this problem. The kids always think it's their fault that the parents have their problem, and it's not. Now, as adults, we know that, but that doesn't fix it. Because what happens is we're left with this underlying feeling of rejection or abandonment or not being able to be loved. And we have to live that out, and we have to manifest it in our life because it's what our unconscious believes is true.
Going from a spiritual perspective here, Craig, just for a second, is that we find that these patterns follow us through this lifetime. And I know we've had discussions about this before. And the fact that even if it has been something that's happened in a past life, you've brought it through into this one, just dealing with it in this life can actually alleviate the karma or get rid of the karma in the past lives. So people don't always have to go to past lives to get rid of this stuff. You know, what you do is fantastic, because it brings it to this point where some people don't believe in past lives, so that's fine. Everyone has the prerogative to believe in what they want. So to be able to deal with it in this lifetime, actually get rid of it, and then heal that pattern or heal the rest of it, from that lineage, that's a really powerful thing. I just want to talk to you a bit now. It's sort of sparked my interest because of a few clients that I've had recently coming through with a lot of anxiety and addiction problems, and what's been happening because of COVID and the situation of the lockdown. What have you noticed in sort of the surge of problems?
Yeah, apart from work taking off and booming, which is always good for me, but not real good. It's not a real good sign of what's going on.
Yeah.
There is a lot of anxiety coming up, particularly in kids. Yeah, I think they're picking it up from their parents because their parents have a little bit of fear as well as to not being sure of what's going to happen. But the kids are picking it up too, and then the whole family unit is sort of living in this sort of underlying fear that they're all trying to cover. And because they're all trying to cover it, it's like a pressure cooker inside of them, and they're tightening that lid of that pressure cooker down with no release. And it's just getting worse and worse. And all of a sudden something explodes. Now, what's happening within these units is that when these things are happening and they feel that there's going to be an explosion, they've got to find a coping mechanism to stop that. And very often they're turning to things like alcohol, or their smoking is going up, or they're becoming more addicted to internet or something else, or online gambling. They're finding ways to move away from themselves internally. So instead of having to deal with it, they go to external ways to fix it. And so what I'm finding, a lot of things, it's all connected. You've got the anxiety, you've got the depression as well. A lot of people, this isn't the way they dreamed their life was going to be, because everybody expects that the way they imagine the future is the way the future is going to be. It doesn't work that way. And if they can't be flexible and be okay with that, they go into these downward spirals.
How would you help someone who maybe came to you with, say, for instance, that lockdown has made them drink more, and now they find that they are just reliant on that?
It depends again on the actual person and the reason why they're doing it. I see a wide variety of people. One's from people who it's a simple habit that has just crept in. Their life's pretty okay. They've always been a bit social, and now they've got lots of time up their sleeve. So, yeah, they've decided just to have a few drinks between Zoom meetings and things like that. It's just become what I call a habit. With them, it's really simple and it's really easy. And it just takes one session, and we can normally get their mind to go, this is silly. We don't need to do this anymore. But then you've got other people, and we've got the drinkers, and this works for drugs as well, but we've got the drinkers, they don't even know they're drunk. Right, so they will have 1 or 2 drinks or 3 maybe, but it doesn't hit them. Everybody else can notice that they've had a few, but they don't feel it. And so they don't have an off switch. And what happens is they're starting to feel good, and they've forgot about their anxiety, they've forgot about their pressure. They think they're completely okay. So they're having another one and another one and another one. And next thing you know, they are really, really drunk, and that's when they notice it. But by then it's too late. Now, with those people, they always say, can you put an off switch in for me? That's all I want, an off switch, so that I don't binge. And for the vast majority of them, that's not really possible.
Is that the same for food then? Because you spoke about binging. So would that be, because I know my stepdaughter, she knows she doesn't have an off switch. Like, she does not have one when it comes to food. And so she can just keep eating, and she could eat 2 main meals the size of, a really big guy.
Yeah. And that's the issue with the weight loss. So with the alcohol and with smoking, with drugs, I mean, everybody knows, like, let's not talk about alcohol. But if you had somebody who come in and said, look, I've got a problem with heroin. Yeah, and they said, could you just give me an off switch so I can only use it on Saturday nights? Yeah, why would you want to just use it on Saturday nights? You've got a problem. With alcohol, because it's legal and because it's so socially accepted and it's everywhere, it's in every TV commercial, it's in every movie, it's all over the place. And I've even heard people say that, well, if I can't drink when I go out, it's boring. And if you get bored hanging out with the people who you hang out with, unless you drink, maybe you need a different group of people. All right.
This is a very good message.
Okay. Now, with the smoking, it's different too, because you're never going to say, let's put in an off switch for your smoking. I only want to do 4 a day. So when we come back to the eating, if you treat an eating disorder as an addiction, for instance, rather than you're eating for nutrition, you're eating to sustain your life. If you're eating purely as a coping mechanism to cover boredom or a feeling, or to fill in time, or any of the hundreds of other things that could possibly be, then we've got that addiction problem. Now, the problem with eating is that you can't tell a person don't eat. All right, although it would work, you'd lose lots of weight. And and with intermittent fasting and all the other sort of fads that are around at the moment, there's a bit of evidence around to say that going for periods of time without food is actually quite good for you, even up to 3-day fasts and things like that. But it's not something you can sustain forever. All right, it's okay for short periods of time. So when it comes to the eating, we have to have a look at what is the reason that is triggering this, and we have to get them happy. All right. So having to really focus and implant joy, happiness, love, all the things that they want, so their life is awesome, and so that they really love themselves, and they're starting to do good things for themselves and their body. And what happens then is they forget about food. The food then becomes an afterthought rather than something that actually makes them feel good. So we get them then to wake up in the morning feeling really, really happy, feeling really good in themselves. If they've decided they want an eating plan where they have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, whatever it is that they've decided, they've already got their choice. They already know what they're going to eat. They already know how much, and then they forget about it and go about their life and have a great time. Taking care of all the stuff that they're using food to fill up on, where in the past they've been empty. So I would say with your relative, she feels empty.
Yeah.
And there's an empty feeling inside of her, which she's mistaking as a need to fill her stomach with food, when in reality she's empty in some other area of her life, and the brain is mistaking the food as what it needs.
I've actually
Wow.
seen it firsthand, actually, Gerlinda, because we have still a mutual friend who lost an awful lot of weight by seeing Craig. I think she was it 35 kilos or something, or nearly 40 kilos. She lost amazingly, and then was able to have a baby.
She had some health problems as well. If anybody else looked at it, they would say, "Well, you can't have a baby, you can't do this, you can't do that." But she's very strong. She didn't take no for an answer.
No, and now she's healthy and happy, and her bubs is 4 or 5 years old. But it's great to see the outcome of what can happen through this modality. And over the years of knowing you, Craig, I've seen many success stories, including some pretty serious ones as well, with people that maybe didn't have any hope in other levels, and you've been able to turn things around for them. So I would guarantee there'd be quite a few people listening to this that will be putting their hands up for appointments.
You can actually do Zoom too without doing face-to-face first. It's just that my preference is I do prefer to be in person, particularly for the first session. Doesn't mean we have to. And if anybody's read some of the reviews that I've got, you'll see there's some on there from people who have just done only online and had good results from it.
Actually helped one of mine in Switzerland, and she was amazed. Switzerland,
Yeah, you can do that. Look, I see people all over the world. So, but as I said, my preference, because I prefer to be sitting with the person, I prefer to be within their energy. I prefer to be able to speak to them, to really see their expressions. There's some very minute things that we look for as hypnotists in people. So I can be talking to a person and they don't really actually realize that I've noticed that they have actually gone where I need them to go. And I can just say, okay, close your eyes and we're off. Whereas on Zoom, it's a little bit harder because I can only really see their head. Yeah, so it's harder to notice everything else.
To finish off our wonderful podcast day, I'm fascinated by this subject. Listen to you all day. There's so much more I know that you can do with your wonderful therapies. One of the things I did want to very quickly just touch on is the trauma stuff that you do. I see a lot of people that have got PTSD and other pretty bad traumas that have happened. So I believe there are methods that you use that can really help with people with PTSD and also trauma. Just briefly run us through that.
Yeah, look, PTSD is actually very common. And I think it's not just everyone thinks PTSD, people in the military, police force, horrible one-off accidents and things like that. That's not necessarily always the case. You can have PTSD from a horrific childhood. You can have PTSD from a bad relationship. You can have, basically, it's just a really big anxiety, for want of a better way, with panic attacks and flashbacks, where the mind hasn't realized that it's over. Okay, the mind just has not realized it's over. And what it's done is, in the PTSD events, it has made snapshots of everything in the environment at the time from all our 5 senses. And if any one of those things is present, it will set the alarm bells off.
Is it also true that sometimes people don't even know what it is that's setting it off? So this could be, again, like an unconscious memory.
So with PTSD, what you're talking about was that you don't know what's setting it off. It's because there's something really obscure that has come into your environment that the unconscious has noticed and you haven't, that is connected to something, and it sets the alarm off. And it's nature saying, be careful, last time we were in this environment, this happened. No different to the guy with the food with the nuggets. Okay, same sort of thing.
Yeah.
The alarm bells are setting off. It's the food that's doing it.
Yeah, we do have so many triggers around us that we don't realize, and it can even be things like smells, as you say, and also music.
Anything. I had a guy who would have panic attacks in a barber chair. He's ex-military and young guy. He never has a problem anywhere, except when he sits in the barber chair. And he can't do it. He cannot do it. He has to get his girlfriend to cut his hair in the kitchen at home. And he didn't know why. But long story short, it happened when he was a young boy and he was on a flight from Adelaide to LA. He's flying to Sydney, and then he flew from Sydney to LA with his dad. And his dad was military as well, but his dad was very, very strict, and he never wanted to upset his dad. So he said to his dad he wanted the window seat, and Dad said, okay, well, you can have the window seat, but don't wake me up. So he knew, don't wake Dad up. But he was dying to go to the toilet, and he didn't want to wake Dad up. All right, so he's busting, and the plane is flying down into LAX, and Dad wakes up, and he says, Dad, I've got to go to the toilet. And Dad goes, well, you have to wait now. And he's going, but I'm busting. He goes, bad luck, you should have gone earlier. Anyway, he's strapped into the seat, and he's got a blanket up around him, and he wet himself. And Dad made a big deal of it. So the whole plane knew he wet himself, and Dad was yelling at him and upset. Why? How could you do it? Everything like that. And he made him walk with his pants wet, through customs and everything. So his brain, that's traumatic for a little kid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, very.
Now, he completely forgot about that event as an adult. But when we asked the mind to take him to the reason he was having panic attacks in the barber chair, that's where his mind took him. What the mistake was is the brain marked out the plane seat and the blanket around him. The brain went, oh, I'm in the barber and I'm getting this anxiety. And he pushed through it. So next time he went to the barbers again, the anxiety got stronger because the brain's going, you're not listening to me. There could be a problem here. And next thing he's focusing on the anxiety, and his brain is going, it's the barber chair that's making me anxious. I'm not going near barber chairs anymore. And it just kept going. And every time he forced through it, it got stronger and stronger. So it morphed from a little small anxiety to focusing on the anxiety and connecting it to the barber chair, to the point where he thought the barber chair was the thing that was setting it off. So he was actually afraid of the anxiety and the panic, not the barber chair.
Yeah.
Wow. And so what happens with our brain then? So once this memory has been recovered, then how does that then be? How do you heal that, or how is that then cleared?
So the thing is, finding it is not the cure.
Okay.
All right. It's nice to have an awareness, but it's not the cure. We've got to scramble the circuitry so that the brain sees the mistake, understands the mistake, and then doesn't fire it off next time it's in the same environment. We don't want it to completely disband every bit of fear. We want you to still have a nice bit of anxiety to let you know when there's a problem, but we don't want it firing off panic and PTSD and things like that. All right, so there are lots of different techniques, and every hypnotist will work differently to disband and to scramble that circuitry. And then there's other times where we get in there and nothing we've tried works, and then it comes down to the practitioner having enough experience to be able to experiment and try new things and work outside the box to make it happen. So it's not always go in there, find the key event, and my God, you're fixed. It doesn't work like that. It does sometimes, but not all the time. Sometimes it is a lot of exploring, ducking and weaving, going down a few dead ends and starting again. It's just knowing that you can fix it keeps you going. But sometimes it just takes a bit of hard slog.
And this is great, I think, for people that maybe have gone through and done talk therapy or any of those types of things, like you said, with psychologists, to then be able to go to something like hypnotherapy that can maybe get there a little bit quicker and, like you said, try and delve into the parts that haven't come up.
Yeah, look, it is like everything though. Like I've had people who've come from psychologists and they've had some great transformations. Right, they've been to a psychologist who was really good, and often I'll say, "Oh, what did they do?" And this, and I'll go, you were really lucky. You got a really good person there. Like she did a great job." And then you get other ones that will go, "This wasn't the right person for me." Yeah, I don't get like in the medical system. I don't know what it's like in Cairns, but in Adelaide, it's a long time to see a psychologist, particularly if you're going through Medicare or a health, the 10-session health plan. And very often they will send you to somebody who is kind of fresh out of uni, who's maybe 24 years old or 25 years old, and they're sending a 60-year-old person with a whole lot of PTSD and relationship problems and everything. And they're looking at this girl who probably knows everything, is probably quite good at what she does, but there's no connection. Yeah, like the older person is going, how could you possibly know what I've been through?
I have no life
Yeah,
experience.
how could you understand? And straight away, the block and the wall comes up in the subconscious that says, you can't help me. It's also got a lot to do with who you see and having a bit of rapport to it. I mean, even with me, I'll say to people, come in, meet me first, make sure you like me, make sure you like the way I work. And there are going to be some people who are not the right person. Yeah, I might just not be the right person. You need to get the right person in order for it to work.
Yeah, and that's a really good point to make. If you've tried it once and it hasn't worked, don't dismiss it altogether just because that
Yeah.
one person wasn't right for you.
And just have a look at the person and make sure it's the right person for you.
My mum used to say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, exactly.
Great saying. Thanks so much, Craig. It's been a pleasure. I can 1,000% recommend Craig. As I said before, I've known you for many years. I know that you're great. I know you've helped me through many wonderful times in my life as well as bad times as well. But, you know, what it's about is getting in and doing something about it. And just wanted to remind everybody that if you're having immediate problems at the moment, you can't get in to see anybody, please, please, please reach out. Call Lifeline, call Beyond Blue. We'll put links downstairs for you so you can have a look.
Thank you so much for joining us, Craig. This has been very eye-opening.
Thanks for listening to the Divine Style Podcast. Please follow, share, and tune in weekly for more spiritual and self-love guidance. You can find out more and ask questions at gerlinda.com.au and alisonmaiden.com.